it's one thing to represent yourself in small claims court, and it's another thing when your liberty is on the line. So we're going to ask Andrew Wolfenson, what do you do when your liberty's on the line, and do you represent yourself?
You hopefully never get to the point where you have to do that.
But then there would be no books written.
This book is the prequel to representing yourself in court, because what he does, this gentleman,
Goldberg,
sets out to clear himself before it gets to the court system.
But in a way, once that process starts, should you lawyer up? That's my real question, because no matter where the process is, whether you're formally indicted or grand juried or any of those things, at what point do you do it yourself as opposed to have professional help?
Law School 101. He who represents himself has a fool for a client.
What about Goldberg?
Goldberg is foolish in certain respects, but not that one, hopefully, if it ever came to it.
So talk about this book. Give us the basic theme.
The theme of the book is, it's really a conglomeration of a lot of very flawed people whose paths cross and eventually cross in a very bad way.
Perfect storm?
Sort of a perfect storm for an attorney who really is very dissatisfied with his life.
Aren't all of us that person?
We are. We are. And like many books and TV shows, it's probably an exaggeration of that. And he thinks solace with someone, but it turns out that's the wrong person.
Okay. Now, you know that according to a number of often quoted surveys, I think the dissatisfaction rate by attorneys is something like 78%.
It's only 78%?
I know. Who are the 22?
Yeah, the other 22 people are working for court systems and
Right.
Professors.
or the legal publication houses.
It depends on what day you ask them, probably, because there are many days when I'm dissatisfied and many days when I'm very satisfied. So I guess it depends on when you get somebody.
Well, I don't know. When Paul and I go to the office and I take out the daily survey, I say, are you somewhat satisfied, very unsatisfied? He always says, I'm very unsatisfied.
We do vote ourselves employees of the month, as always.
That's right. We actually put a little sign on the door in the office, and it says, once again, Paul Salmon is employee of the month.
Well, my office is just me and 2 assistants, and I am never employee of the month.
Wait, so where's your practice and what do you do?
My practice is in Union, New Jersey. I have another office that I use in Cedar Knolls, New Jersey, and Morris County sometimes. The basic practice now is divorces, hence the book.
Okay.
It was an outcrop of that. Bankruptcies, litigations, some real estate, pretty much a general practice.
Okay. If people want to call you, 908-686-7230?
That's correct.
All right. And then they want to go to your website for the law stuff, not the book.
It's wolfensonlaw.com, and I should spell that.
Yeah.
It's WOLFENSONLAW.com.
And talk a little bit about bankruptcy, because that's always kind of an interesting topic. There's so much economic pressure out there right now, and people are feeling the pinch. What are you kind of seeing out there? What do people kind of come in with that are maybe misperceptions that you have to sort of straighten them out with?
The thing with bankruptcy now versus 10 or so years ago is, back then there was a great stigma to it because very few people were filing versus the general public. Now it's prevalent. They changed the bankruptcy laws in 2006, presumably to make it harder for people to file. However, because of the economic downturn the last few years, the filing skyrocketed a couple of years back, and they've stayed pretty high. And people come in, and that's one of the times, believe it or not, when I feel most satisfied is the first meeting with a bankruptcy client, because they come in ashamed of themselves. I have all this debt. I can't make my bills. I feel like I'm letting myself and my family down. And I explain to them what the process is and that the bankruptcy laws are not punitive in nature. They're supposed to help people. And if you go to our website, the first page talks about what we call a fresh start. And what the bankruptcy code is supposed to do is give people a fresh start. And we discuss it, and I tell them they're not alone, that they're actually the rule, not the exception now. And I ease their minds, and they walk out generally much happier than they came in. And that's when I feel satisfied that I'm actually helping someone, because we all get into the law, presumably to help people.
Presumably.
And oftentimes what we do doesn't necessarily help people. We spend our time pushing paper around and fighting with people.
Oh, yeah, fighting for sure.
So we fight a lot with people. And in those cases, then I can help someone and see a very tangible assistance given to them because they feel so much better. They walk in all slumped over. They walk out with their head held high. I'm not alone. I can do this. I can get through this, and I'll be better. And they thank me. And I don't get thanked an awful lot, unfortunately, by a lot of my clients. It's sad. You'd think everybody would, but that's not the case. So those are the cases, actually, we talk about the dissatisfaction. Maybe the 22% of satisfied people do bankruptcy law.
Maybe. You are listening to Taking Care of Business on 88.1 FM, WCWP, Brookville, New York. So we're talking with Andrew Wolfenson, and he's an attorney, author, and we'll talk about some of his charities and things like that, just in case you want to look up at his book. It's inhisown.defense.com. Just going back to bankruptcy, and a quick lightning round of questions. How often can you go bankrupt? What's the spacing between bankruptcies?
The two main chapters that people use are Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. Chapter 13 is when you pay the money back over time, and you can do that pretty much as you want.
Wow.
Chapter
cool.
7, which is when you get rid of your debts and don't pay them, you can only do once every 8 years now.
Okay. So once every 8 years.
8 years.
Is there a common misperception that people have about bankruptcy when they go into it?
The main misperception seems to be about their houses, whether or not they can keep a house, or they lose a house, or basically things about the house is the main misperception I have to deal with people.
Well, it's probably the greatest fear because the biggest purchase you'll ever make in your entire life is your home. And I guess your home is also, your single source of stability and identity. So when that's in jeopardy, I'm sure it just freaks people out to no end.
It does, and it's even stranger now because with the economic downturn and the devaluation of properties, especially in New Jersey, I have people who come in to file bankruptcy, and they have a house that, let's say, is worth $200,000, and their mortgage is $400,000, and they're filing bankruptcy to keep the house. And I asked them why, and it's that American dream answer. This was my dream. This is my house. This is where my children are. I want to stay here.
And I need to live somewhere.
Exactly. And sometimes what they're paying in a mortgage, though, is more than they would pay in rent. There's no logic to it except that that's where they want to be. And I have to help them with that.
Just a quick question, because I don't want to go off topic, but how much is property taxes killing people? I guess this is a loaded question. To the extent so that, government and taxes and taxes and taxes are squeezing people so what's left to pay bills is diminishing.
Well, in New Jersey, the property taxes are among the highest in the nation, don't forget. And even though we allegedly have a cap of 2% increases each year now, some people are still complaining left and right about how high their taxes are and even how high they're going up. Property tax appeals are on the rise, but then the problem becomes if everybody files a property tax appeal and gets their taxes reduced, who's going to pay for the social services and the civil services? So it's a vicious cycle to a certain extent.
To what extent has Atlantic City sort of not brought in the revenue because now there's all this competition, especially in New York, for casino gambling?
I don't think Atlantic City ever part of the revenue was supposed to. I think that was a big problem that every so often would rear its head, that they were not giving back what they were supposed to give back based on the original agreements. Oh. And the competition now could only make it worse. And now you have casinos going bankrupt.
Which is an amazing concept when you think about it.
It absolutely is, but they say they are.
Wow. So, speaking of dreams, you dreamed about writing a book.
Yes.
So had that like one day you're walking around or you're in the shower or you're driving the car, and what grabbed you?
Well, I actually wrote a book years ago. I wrote a book in 1994 about a fantasy baseball league. And I shopped it around to various agents because back then there was no internet and you had to do it the old-fashioned way.
No e-books, no
and
Kindle.
Nobody bit. So the book lay printed out in a binder in my office, actually. And then what happened is I had this idea one day. I was reading the newspaper, and it was an article about a person who had been killed in a car accident. And I started to think, well, spouses often joke about their spouse being worth more money dead than alive because of insurance. I wonder if. What would happen if? And this book started to germinate. And this was actually in 2011. And I wrote the first 4 chapters in 2011. And then I put it aside. And then I made a New Year's resolution this September.
Well, we know which New Year that was.
Exactly. The non-secular New Year, to write again. because I've been writing a blog now for a few years now, and some of the people on the blog site had written books, and I was very impressed by that, and I thought that I could do it. And I started writing again in earnest, and because it had been in my head for so long, once I started writing again, it just started to flow. And then one of the few positives out of Hurricane Sandy was my office was closed because there was no power. But
Yeah, we had that too. Yeah,
No-
yeah.
no
I had
power.
power at home, though. So I went to the office a few times and brought files home, and I had my email, but most of New Jersey was shut down. So we weren't doing full days worth of work. So I was writing. And that was pretty much when I was able to get myself locked into the point where I could almost see the end of the tunnel with the book. I finished it about a week later and then spent a few weeks editing it and going over it and redoing it, and then put it out for sale on this CreateSpace site through Amazon in mid-December.